1 week ago, the 2026 Pokemon Go APAC Qualifiers were held. This was an online tournament where if trainers performed well enough, they could earn a guaranteed qualification to the Pokemon Go World Championships later this summer. The turnout for the tournament was pretty incredible, with a lot of top competitors battling it out, trying to earn that guaranteed trip to Worlds. And when the dust settled at the end of a long weekend of battling, a Pokemon that hadn't seen success for quite some time, Shadow Dusknoir, ended up emerging victorious. Now, who was the trainer who ended up taking home the win with Shadow Dusknoir? Well, their name is Shadow Lord. The team they used featured Togekiss, Shadow Dusknoir, Empoleon, Shadow Quagsire, Licky, and Wigglytuff, and today I'm going to be showcasing some of their games from their qualifiers. The first round we'll be taking a look at is against DHJ, who's running a team with Togekiss, Licky, Feraligatr, Grumpig, Voltage Fortress, and Stunfisk. Battlers lock in for game number 1, and it's a very neutral lead, Wigglytuff into Licky. Neutralizing Licky on the lead would be massive for Shadow Lord, as that means the Shadow Dusknoir is going to be entirely free into DHJ's backline. Licky will land the Body Slam, but now it's Wigglytuff's turn to strike back as it debuffs with the Icy Wind. DHJ doesn't want to stay on the field, pivots out into the Grumpig, and that's going to be immediately answered with Shadow Dusknoir. These Astonishes are brutally oppressive. Dusknoir respects the Shadow Ball, gets baited with Dynamic Punch, and that does mean that Dusknoir is going to have to fire off a Shadow Punch. Shadow Punch will guarantee a shield back before the Shadow Ball is reached for Grumpig. Grumpig going to unleash Shadow Ball, and Dusknoir is going to give up the final shield. Dusknoir exits with a decent amount of residual energy, and it also exits with quite a lot of health as well. Opponent is not going to bring in the Licky, instead they're sending in Feraligatr. But Feraligatr is not an answer to a Dusknoir of energy. Shadow Punch does get the shield. Dusknoir going to make it the Shadow Punch number 2. That forces energy out of the Feraligatr, and the Shadow Dusknoir just completely took over this mid-game. Now in comes Licky, and unfortunately, this is basically Feraligatr's worst nightmare. In this moment, Shadow Lord just has to prevent DHJ from catching a Shadow Ball onto Licky. So Shadow Lord is just going to keep farming, going for the Body Slam. He did not want to throw the Shadow Ball in case DHJ went for the catch. DHJ finally pivots out into the Licky, and there's the switch back into the Wigglytuff. Wigglytuff approaching a Swift very quickly, only 2 away, makes the Swift, wins charge attack priority, and that's going to be a game 1 win. Shadow Lord's Licky is just outside of Hydro Cannon range, and DHJ would need the Hydro Cannon to knock out if he wanted a chance to win. DHJ will go for the undercharge, trying to put it into Shadow Claw down range. Feraligatr does get the farm down, in comes Licky, but again, Hydro Cannon is just simply never going to be enough here. DHJ knows it, goes for the bad manners Ice Beam. I believe Ice Beam does do 2% less than a Hydro Cannon, but you can see Licky has way more HP than that. Licky knocks out with the Shadow Ball, and that's a game 1 win to Shadow Lord. The battlers lock in for game number 2, and it's a slightly negative lead, Shadow Dusknoir into Stunfisk. Normally, Dusknoir can dictate neutral matchups, but Stunfisk is so incredibly bulky that Dusknoir does actually end up losing this interaction. Mud Bomb is going to land, Dusknoir goes for Dynamic Punch, covering for the catch, and DHJ catches onto Licky. Sensational plays from Shadow Lord as Licky gets rocked. Shadow Lord banks energy, tries to get the Shadow Ball catch, but DHJ not going to fall for it. Instead, going to fire off the Body Slam. But banking that Dynamic Punch on that Dusknoir for later should hopefully pay dividends for Shadow Lord later in the game. Body Slam after Body Slam is going to connect. Shadow Lord overfarming as much as possible, not wanting to risk charge attack priority in the Licky mirror. Body Slam will take the knockout. There's still quite a lot of energy available on the Unova Stunfisk, and Stunfisk hits the field. Licky is still outside of a range where Mud Bomb will take the knockout, so DHJ's charge attack is going to fall short, and now Licky gets to hit back hard with the Shadow Ball. While Shadow Ball will not knock out either, it'll put it pretty close to Body Slam range. Licky tries to reach the Body Slam, but 1 turn before it gets there, Stunfisk fires out the discharge, and that's going to be the end of Licky. Empoleon's going to have a pretty tough time against the Stunfisk in the back, so Shadow Lord is going to bring in Dusknoir. Dusknoir launches Shadow Punch, taking the knockout in the back. That's not what he was hoping to see. It's Feraligatr, and Feraligatr being up a turn is game winning for DHJ. Shadow Lord is going to need a catch to have any chance to win this game, but considering it's the non-Shadow Feraligatr, even a catch might not be enough, just because the Drill Peck is never going to do a lot of damage onto that Feraligatr. But Feraligatr always ahead, 1 Shadow Claw is just absolutely devastating. Drill Peck is going to be shielded on charge attack priority, so Empoleon will win the IV-dependent charge attack priority tie here. The game comes down to this. Does Shadow Lord get the catch? Shadow Lord goes for the catch. DHJ doesn't fall for it, and that is going to be a win. As Shadow Lord knows, that is just simply not Drill Peck range. That's why he didn't end up throwing. Hydro Cannon lands. Empoleon will fire back with the Drill Peck, but this is just simply too little, too late. Drill Peck connects. Feraligatr survives. and DHJ gets the much-needed equalizer. In this series, we're going to a decisive game number 3. Bad lead for Shadow Lord as he locks in for game number 3. It's going to be Wigglytuff into the Grumpig. Grumpig is very neutrally dominant here, as the Psy-Waves shred through Wigglytuff, and Grumpig has a huge pacing advantage as well. Dynamic Punch is going to be no-shielded. There's the pivot. Shadow Lord getting aggressive, sending in the Dusknoir, and that's going to be instantly answered with the Licky Licky. But importantly, Shadow Lord did get a 3-turn head start, meaning that he makes Dynamic Punch on the potential CMP tie to the Shadow Ball. Licky Licky doesn't go for it, instead over farming, but landing Dynamic Punch now means that Dusknoir is going to be completely controlling this mid-game. Dusknoir over farming, playing to the CMP tie that it does in fact win. Shadow Punch is double resisted, but it pressures the shield, and now Shadow Dusknoir can probably astonish down the Licky Licky. Licky Licky proving to not be much of a problem for the Dusknoir. In comes Feraligatr. Feraligator's gonna get hit with the Shadow Punch, and this Dusknoir is just an absolute nightmare. Shield comes up from Feraligatr. There's the pivot out into the Licky Licky, and unfortunately for Feraligatr, its inability to two-shot here is going to be its downfall. Hydro Cannon lands. Licky Licky survives. Another Hydro Cannon is reached. But Licky Licky just simply does not care. Hydro Cannon lands, Licky Licky going for the body slam. Shadow Ball would not quite have taken the knockout, so going the double body slam route. Switch timer will now be up for DHJ. DHJ sends in Licky Licky, trying for the catch, but Shadow Lord does not fall for it. Instead, gonna overfarm, try and maximize energy, take the knockout with the body slam. The Feraligatr has been preserved, but the Feraligatr is very low, and there's a Swift loaded on the Wigglytuff for later. In comes Grumpig. Grumpig gets sniped down with the Icy Wind. Icy Wind does do slightly less than a Swift. Icy Wind connects. That does still mean that Dynamic Punch will pick up the knockout here, even at -1, but this can then set up the Shadow Dusknoir. In comes Dusknoir, there's the pivot into Feraligatr. Feraligatr makes the Hydro Cannon, but importantly, that Astonish landed. The Hydro Cannon will take the knockout, but now Licky Licky farms down, gets the exit with the Body Slam loaded. That game got very close towards the end, but Shadow Lord found a way. Body Slam knocks out the Grumpig, and Shadow Lord's on to the Losers Finals. His opponent in Losers Finals is Yakai, the 2024 Pokemon Go World Champion. Yakai's team consists of Togekiss, Licky Licky, Shadow Quagsire, Empoleon, Shadow Bugbite Fortress, and Galarian Corsola. The battlers lock in for game number 1. It's Shadow Dusknoir into Empoleon. This is a pretty good lead for Shadow Lord. Shadow Lord will be able to just win the 2s here by fully farming down, although he can try and fire off Shadow Punches to get shields back. Shadow Lord over farms. There's the catch attempt from Yakai, but Shadow Lord saw it coming. Shadow Lord now going to be full sending Dynamic Punch. Shield comes up from Yakai. Shadow Lord makes Dynamic Punch number 2, but he banks it for later, and he's going to be switching Licky Licky into Licky Licky. Yakai did store 3 Metal Sounds of energy on the Empoleon, so Shadow Lord having an entire Dynamic Punch means that he will be at an energy advantage when it comes down to the endgame. In the meantime, he's just utilizing the bulk of Licky Licky to try and neutralize the head start that Yakai has on his Licky Licky and just try and reposition as best as he possibly can for the inevitable endgame. Here we find out that Yakai's Licky Licky does win charge type priority over Shadow Lord's. Body Slam, never going to take the knockout there, but it is very good information for these battlers to have. Body Slam will be putting Yakai pretty close to Body Slam knockout range. Shadow Lord just going to let this go, as he knows there really isn't a point in shielding there, because the Empoleon is quite a bit of energy. He's going to send in Togekiss. There's the switch into Empoleon, immediately answered with the Shadow Dusknoir. Dusknoir launches Shadow Punch. Shield comes up from the Empoleon, but this will allow Shadow Dusknoir to get the shield at a full farm down. And this Dusknoir energy is very, very threatening into Yakai's team. Yakai actually decides to stop tapping. He's going to try and get a bunch of farm on whatever he has in the back. He knows he needs energy if he wants a chance to win this game. In the back, it's Togekiss, but unfortunately, Togekiss is not going to be able to farm down before the second Shadow Punch is reached. The Dusknoir was just too far ahead. The gamble for Yakai does not pay off. Second Shadow Punch connects. Togekiss falls. In comes Licky Licky, answered with the Togekiss, and that's going to be a Game 1 win for Shadow Lord. Yakai failing that catch early in the game really put him in a rough spot, and Shadow Lord banking all that Dusknoir energy paid off massively as Shadow Dusknoir just completely swept the endgame. The battlers lock in for game number 2, and it's a disastrous lead for Shadow Lord, leading Togekiss into Corsola. Shadow Lord farms up, tries for the Nightshade catch, does not get it, and the Licky Licky save switch is going to be instantly answered with the Empoleon. Bit of a slow switch in there from Yakai since he was stuck in the Astonish animation, and that means that Licky Licky may have the ability to flip this matchup. Licky Licky will fire off the Shadow Ball. The next Shadow Ball is to be reached on charge attack priority. Will Shadow Lord throw an alignment? No, but Yakai does, and that does give a free rollout over to Shadow Lord. Shadow Lord now with a tough call to make. Will he go for the bait? Yes, he will. Decision time for Yakai. Is he going to put up the shield here? Does he call the bait? He puts up the shield. Licky Licky able to outpace, saves the energy, and the pivot back into the Togekiss. The Shadow Ball has been preserved. Aura Sphere takes the knockout, and Yakai is going to be sending in Togekiss. Yakai knows he will be able to absorb energy very comfortably on the Togekiss, but Shadow Lord has preserved that Licky Licky to deal with the Corsola. Togekiss will be able to take the knockout here with Psyshock. Shadow Lord has taken enough damage throughout the course of this game, but Shadow Lord wants shields down. Shadow Lord puts up the shield, fires off the Psyshock. Is Yakai going to be protecting this Togekiss? Yakai does put up the shield just to get combo played. In comes the Licky Licky. Shadow Ball picks up the knockout, and Shadow Lord has completely flipped the game on its head. In comes Corsola. Corsola forced to throw energy. It can never get the Astonish down. Power Gem takes the knockout. And despite a pretty terrible lead, Shadow Lord has managed to play his way out. In comes the Shadow Quagsire. Quagsire normally has a pretty poor matchup in the Corsola, but the Corsola has already taken a lot of chip damage throughout the course of this game. He can just spam out Aqua Tails, getting the Corsola lower and lower and lower, and look at the catch. Getting the catch onto the Togekiss. Nightshade will take the knockout. Quagsire now going to go for the Mud Bomb. This Mud Bomb will not enable a farm down, though. Shadow Lord needed to go for the double Aqua Tail. It's going to be very close. He does make the Aqua Tail. He's going to be taking home the win. Dominance from Shadow Lord. He's going to be taking the Losers Finals 2-0, and he advances to Grands. His opponent in the Grand Finals is XRVOS, who is running a very interesting team built around Dondozo. Dondozo, Shadow Quagsire, Volt Switch Fortress, Licky Licky, Togekiss, and Wigglytuff. XRVOS comes from the winner's side, so he only has to win one best of 3. Shadow Lord has to win 2. Hey, that's a very good start in game number 1, leading Empoleon into Wigglytuff. XRVOS save switches into Dondozo, and he ran a line that was very, very weak to Empoleon. Empoleon lands the Drill Peck, but look at the bulk of Dondozo. Dondozo is so incredibly bulky that the Drill Peck doesn't even come close to picking up the 2-hit KO. Dondozo lands the Surf, Shadow Lord saves energy, and he's going to be pivoting out and sending in Licky Licky. Licky Licky overforms, playing to a CMP tie that it does not win. Even a Shadow Ball would not take the knockout here, but Dondozo connects with the Outrage, and that is meaningful HP lost from the Licky Licky. Licky Licky now going to be faced with the Wigglytuff switch in from XRVOS, but XRVOS switch locking that Wigglytuff means that the Empoleon is about to absolutely feast. Shadow Lord would love to try and get out of the matchup and does, banks the Shadow Ball, combo plays with the Empoleon, and Empoleon's going to be winning charge attack priority. Hydro Cannon shielded by the Wigglytuff. XRVOS desperately trying to burn the switch timer so the Wigglytuff can escape this nightmare matchup. Empoleon gonna keep farming. Wigglytuff throws the Swift on alignment. A smart play from XRVOS, as now the switch timer will be available. Wigglytuff pivots out. In comes Dondozo. Empoleon can never farm down, and Empoleon is forced to waste energy as Drill Peck knocks out the Dondozo. What does XRVOS have in the back? He's never going to be sending in the Wigglytuff here. He's going to be bringing in the Volt Switch Fortress, and that is exactly what Quagsire was hoping to see. Shadow Lord threw one Metal Sound and then transfer the Volt Switch onto the Quagsire. A very, very heads-up play. XRVOS can now spam out Sand Tombs, debuffing the Quagsire more and more, but Quagsire is just really never threatened by the Volt Switches. What will threaten it, however, is the Charms onto its debuff defense stat. Wigglytuff switches in. Aqua Tail will be shielded. Quagsire races to the Aqua Tail, able to get there, but losing charge attack priority. Now it's all up to Empoleon. Empoleon is very low. Can Empoleon get the farm down here? Empoleon does get the farm down, barely able to hang on. Shadow Lord goes for the combo play with the Shadow Ball that he saved on Licky Licky from earlier. Shadow Ball puts it in range. Hydro Cannon is going to take the knockout, and Shadow Lord's going to be taking the Game 1 win. The Dondozo definitely made things very difficult for Shadow Lord, but he's still able to get the win. Speaking of difficult, that is a terrible lead in game number 2, leading Togekiss into the Volt Switch Fortress. Save switch into Licky Licky. Licky Licky does get a rollout for free as XRVOS fires off the Rock Tomb. Rock Tomb, never going to do a lot, but getting debuffed and then seeing a Dondozo is basically any Licky Licky's worst nightmare. Look at that Shadow Ball. That does absolutely nothing onto that Dondozo. If we thought Dondozo had crazy bulk before, now that this Licky Licky is debuffed, man, it is an absolute shambles. Thankfully, switch timer does come up. The desync of the timers is punished as Togekiss will hit the field. Dondozo fires off the Surf. Togekiss gonna look to overfarm quite substantially. Dondozo makes it to Surf number 2, and Togekiss is gonna be forced to put up a shield as it tries to go for a farm down. Dondozo does not want to let the farm down happen. There's the pivot back into the Fortress. Can Fortress get the Volt Switch down before the second Aura Sphere is reached? No! Togekiss able to hang on, make it to a second Aura Sphere, and this is gonna be putting some pretty nice damage onto the Fortress. And now the Fortress gives the shield back. In comes the Quagsire. Quagsire is going to be debuffed by the Sand Tomb, but this is the matchup that Quagsire was brought on the field for. Quagsire going to overfarm perfectly, playing to a CMP tie that it does in fact win. Aquatail is going to deny that Fortress energy, and the opponent reveals their final Pokemon in the back is their own Quagsire, and they do win charge attack priority. That is very good information for Shadow Lord to have. Shadow Lord is still defense dropped, so ideally he would love to try and pivot out of this matchup when he can to try and restore his defense stat back to normal. There it is, the pivot into the Licky Licky. Licky Licky just gonna fire off Body Slam. Body Slam shielded up by the Quagsire. Licky Licky gonna try and make it to Body Slam number 2. Able to get there, but there's the catch onto Dondozo. Dondozo's bulky enough that Licky Licky is gonna be full charging this. Back in comes the Quagsire. Quagsire throwing 2, and the move ensuring the rollout is never going to land. Is Shadow Lord in range? Will his Quagsire hang on? This is charge attack priority. He is in the green. He should be able to hang on here. Aquatail lands. He survives, and he's going to be taking the first series 2 games to 0, and he's going to be forcing a fresh best of 3 to crown the APAC champion. Battlers lock in for game number 1 of the bracket reset, and it's a pretty neutral lead. Togekiss into Licky Licky. To me, this is the matchup that completely defines this meta. We do have a meta update arriving in about a week's time that is probably looking to shake some things up, but for this iteration of the meta, this to me feels like the matchup that really defines what this meta is about. Both Pokemon able to inflict some pretty massive damage onto each other, but a matchup that can be played out in dozens of different ways. Exarvos able to get the shield back. Togekiss looking to overfarm. This Aura Sphere won't quite take the knockout, but it will put Licky Licky very low. There's the pivot and the catch into the Licky Licky. Very nice play from Shadow Lord as Togekiss has been preserved. Licky Licky gonna be answered with that Dondozo. Dondozo has been an absolute nuisance so far. We got to see what the matchup looked like when Licky Licky was debuffed, but now Licky Licky has his full attack stat. And that Shadow Ball does do quite a lot of damage. It looks like Shadow Ball does not pick up the 2-hit knockout, but with the rollouts, it will come pretty close. Dondozo goes for the outrage, but Licky Licky hangs on. 1 HP and a dream. Licky Licky survives. There's the pivot into Quagsire. Quagsire unable to get the mud shot down. The Dondozo is just too bulky. Quagsire Aquatail is going to be shielded as Dondozo wants this energy. But Quagsire more than happy to go shields down. Exarvos is very low on the Licky Licky. He's going to be bringing in his final Pokemon, which is the Quagsire. And being up 1 mud shot is critical for Shadow Lord here. Shadow Lord is always guaranteed to land 2 Aquatails before Exarvos can do the same. Exarvos wins charge attack priority in this matchup. We found that out earlier, and that's why being up energy is so important. But it turns out he's just going to bank the energy, combo play with the Aura Sphere, and Quagsire is getting KO'd. In comes that Licky Licky, but it's just too low. It falls to the peck damage. In comes Dondozo. Dondozo gets the farm down, but Quagsire has the Aquatail. Shadow Lord has now won 3 games in a row. He is 1 win away from being crowned the APAC Qualifier champion. Battlers lock in for game number 2, and that's the lead Shadow Lord was hoping to see as he leads the Shadow Quagsire into the Voltage Fortress. Dondozo safe switch from Exarvos. Shadow Lord doesn't have a strong answer, fires off the Mud Bomb, does get the shield, gonna stay in with the Quagsire, go for another Mud Bomb, but in staying in this long, the switch timers have been very heavily misaligned. Mud Bomb finally connects. Now that he's gotten some chip damage, he sends in the Licky Licky, but after only 1 more charge attack, the switch timer will be up. And Dondozo is already at the back-to-back surfs. Dondozo goes for that catch, but they end up catching his Shadow Ball onto Fortress. This is exactly the charge attack that Shadow Lord did want to throw. Shadow Lord gonna try and race to the Shadow Ball here, able to get there. Fortress had no residual energy, and 4 to the first Rock Tomb is a bit slow. Shadow Ball is gonna connect. There's the catch and sneak onto the Quagsire. What a play by Shadow Lord, dancing in and out of matchups, catching the Rock Tomb, can't quite get the mud shot down. But Sand Tomb will fail to take the KO here. Sand Tomb will put the Quagsire very low. Quagsire undertaps the Aquatail, predicting the Dondozo snipe attempt, and will get just a little bit of chip damage. It turns out Quagsire actually survived the waterfall there, so could have made the Mud Bomb. In comes Licky Licky. Licky Licky will lose charge attack priority, and now Shadow Lord is going to let this go. The win con in this moment is going to be a 1 shield peck farm down of Dondozo. Dondozo's bulk has made it very annoying to deal with in this series, but in this moment, its bulk betrays it. It gives such a huge farm down to Togekiss, and now Togekiss is looking to completely run away with the endgame. In the back is Quagsire. Quagsire shields up the Aura Sphere, but Togekiss is just looking to farm up to the back-to-back Aura Spheres. Togekiss will be able to get there, and Aquatail is just simply never going to be taking the knockout. Shadow Lord no shields, Aquatail lands, firing off the Aura Sphere. Exarvos does still have a catch potential. Aura Sphere is going to land. Exarvos farms up. There's the catch attempt, into the fortress. It was too low to deal any kind of meaningful damage, and Shadow Lord has done it. 4 wins in a row, getting a bracket reset, and he is the APAC Qualifiers champion. Big congratulations to Shadow Lord for winning the 2026 Pokemon Go APAC Qualifiers, and many thanks for sending in the footage. Shadow Dusknoir is a Pokemon that we've seen have success in the Pokemon Go Championship Series previously, but honestly, it's been a while since Dusknoir won an event. So it's cool to see that Dusknoir still has a ton of play in this meta, especially in those earlier rounds. Shadow Dusknoir was just an absolute force of nature, taking knockouts left and right, and putting insane pressure onto the opponent's team. Thank you so much for watching today's video. My name is HomeSliceHenry, and this is MoreSliceHenry, my second channel where I make content primarily related to the Pokemon Go Championship Series, educational content, and just any content that I don't feel really fits on my main channel. If you enjoyed watching today's video, please do help support the content by leaving a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. I know I do have a lot of viewers who are subscribed to the main channel and not subscribed to here, so it's probably worth double checking, because there's a good chance you haven't subscribed to this channel just yet. And I'll see you guys in the next one.